September 28th, and I made a clip a little bit ago, just probably 3 hours ago or so, and I think I still have my sunglasses on the top of my head. And I think that I want to clarify that my spontaneous, showing you sort of what this fiasco with court was about. No, I'm not manic, and I didn't suddenly flip a screw or anything like that. And then, of course, you see me crying, so then it looks kind of weird. But, no, what I wanted to show is I basically did, in that moment, want to sort of demonstrate. And if it had to be theatrical, then, I knew it was. But how else, when sometimes I'm saying the same things over and over? I don't know how many times I have to say the same things over and over. It doesn't seem to get anyone's attention. I mean, what do I have to do? Walk around? I'm not sure what it takes in this country to be taken seriously. I mean, obviously that's not exactly being taken seriously, but it makes a point. And it doesn't matter how composed or dignified I am. The more dignified and composed I am, the more that I am tortured. And anytime that I'm getting back on my feet, or I think that I am, this country, the aerospace defense industry, NASA, and the Department of Defense, whoever is in charge specifically of this remote, because it's, I have an idea that it's possibly even involving some doctors and scientists. I don't think that it's just NASA and just military personnel. And the reason I have that opinion is because there have been so many medical doctors that have been involved in this and in helping to conceal what's been going on. So they're basically, a lot of them have known what's happening. They expect me to show up at the hospital or ER at a certain time. They take labs, they take a bunch of, I've had all kinds of blood labs done. In Seattle, I found out a whole bunch, everything was being sent to Virginia, like the state of Virginia. And, I mean, there have been times where I've had 8 to 10 little vials of blood taken, and then when I ask what my blood results are, I'm being told, well, we did a CBC and it's normal, and then we did something else, like a blood count, something else that's pretty typical or normal to do, and that's normal, so you're a little low on this, but it looks like it's okay. And I've always asked, well, what about the 7 other tubes of blood that you took? And no one has ever had a very good reason for all of the additional blood that was taken and why it was put into separate little tubes. And they just say, well, we take extra just in case we might need it, in case the doctor decides to do another test, and then we don't have to come over and stick a needle in your arm again. But I've just had, that made sense to me maybe the first or second time, but then when I continued to see large amounts of blood being sectioned off into small vials, I don't think that that's very typical. I don't think that a lot of patients, I don't know how many people have been to the hospital like I have because I've had to go there, but, if any of you have had a blood draw, I don't know how many of you have had, maybe you watch them put it into those tubes, right, after they draw your blood. What seems to be standard is maybe 2 or 3 tubes. Typically they just take the amount for what tests they're doing, and maybe 1 or maybe 2 additional, possibly. But I've had blood samples taken and put into, like 5 different additional tubes, little tubes, and I'm sort of wondering what in the world. It's like there's this huge blood collection on me. And I've been forced to go to the hospital and then had my blood drawn after being tortured. So it's sort of like I'm being tortured and then someone's wanting to analyze my blood and see if it shows up, if any kind of effects show up in my blood, or how it changes my blood. You know, or if the ongoing torture is affecting my physical health. I even had the idea that possibly, at first I kind of thought, well, are they just taking an extra couple things in case they want to test my blood for drugs? But then I realized, no, they're not testing me for drugs. I mean, they may have maybe a long time ago from the start, like hoping to maybe find something on me if they didn't know that I wasn't a drug user. But at some point, it was pretty clear to almost all the medical professionals that I was not a drug user at all. And yet I have had an excessive amount of blood taken from me and put into little tubes from the East Coast, like Washington, D.C. and Maryland, from Tennessee, and that would have been when I finally had a blood draw, when I was in the psych ward, being evaluated, not hospitalized, but evaluated supposedly. Well, that's what they said, and it's true because no judge signed an order to have me hospitalized, but the things that they did to me without authority to hospitalize me were atrocious. And I've had an excessive amount of blood drawn in Seattle and in Wenatchee and a variety of other places. And even in this town, I've had to go up to the hospital after extreme and very severe torture, and being driven to the hospital, I mean really forced to go there to get some kind of painkiller and be treated. And then all of a sudden, it's just, I go, every time that I go now, or that I have gone in the past, ever since I've been in Oregon, when I finally figured out that the federal government has been definitely using me for research, or, you know, trying to pass off hate crime with a little research side to things. Ever since then, every time I've gone to the emergency room in the state of Oregon since I've been back here, and maybe over a year, it always comes to my mind that, well, they're just taking another sample to send to somebody to document whatever harm they've done to me, to make it look like, well, we're taking blood samples, so yes, this is a project, you know, and not hate crime. It's hate crime. It started out as hate crime. It's always been hate crime. It will always be hate crime. And any sort of little off-label description that you want to give hate crime for something else like research, you can go ahead and give torture and hate crime a little off-label tag as research. But it's still hate crime and torture. So all of that to say, I just didn't want anyone to think that I basically haven't wanted, I don't want you to think that, after I've gone through all of this and I try to get the attention of so many different doctors and different people and individuals, I guess what I was going to say is that I think that there are some doctors and scientists behind it who are just looking like normal people, aside from the ones who are collecting quote-unquote documentation or evidence for their quote-unquote research. I think that given the fact I had microchips put into my body in 1995, and then that hospital got into telesurgery and telepharmacy, I know that they began teletorture against me in 1996, which is just, a little over. They basically let my body heal a little bit, and then they started torturing me to see if it worked. So then I've had teletorture. So if it's just regular doctors that sit behind the computer and do the telesurgery, and just regular doctors and scientists who sit behind a computer to distribute the telepharmacy, then I'm sure that some of the torture that's happening to me could possibly be from somebody who's just sitting at a computer at some remote location and is even just a doctor, but is doing this deliberately. I mean, from a remote location. So when these horrible things have been happening to me and my family for such a long time, and it seems like nothing that I do makes any difference. You know, to almost be dramatic for just a minute and be a little bit shocking and tearing out some pages of a book and throwing things around. I mean, it looks kind of crazy, but that is truly how crazy this court system has been and how they've treated me and my son. That is the kind of respect that they've had for the law, for following the law. I mean, just following the rules so that it's fair for on all sides. If they really want to know what the truth is, you know, you have certain established guidelines, and that helps everyone to then make a good judgment. That's what a judge is supposed to do. A judge is not even a lawyer. A judge is not supposed to take sides and hide evidence from one side to favor the other side. A judge is required to be impartial, and they can come to a judicial decision at some point, and it might be for one side and against one side. I mean, it always will be. But a judge cannot throw out evidence, refuse to release evidence, and work a bunch of little favors for the other side. They can't withhold records. If somebody files something or tries to file something in court, they can't refuse to file it. They cannot do arbitrary favors for the opposite side. I would never expect a judge to do that for me against somebody that I was up against. I mean, if I found out that a judge, you know, I had a case, let's say, against John Camp, and let's say that I found out that a judge, that he had made a motion, and let's say there was some damaging information in it, or you know, about him, or about, let's say he made a motion actually that was damaging against me, and it had some factual basis, and it would have really could have tipped the lawsuit over to his side. And then a judge really liked me, thought I was really sweet, cute, whatever. The judge decides to take a hold of John Camp's motion and tells his clerks to let him know that he's not going to file it and just ignores it. Or then maybe he holds on to it for a really long time, and then it disappears. And it's not just like any old motion, it's a big motion. And then everybody's claiming it was never delivered to them. Nobody ever got it. And then we find out it's not even a clerk. It's that the judge has done several different little favors for me, because he really wants me to win, but he's doing all these little favors for me, and he's actually taking out a bunch of evidence, making a lot of unfair restrictions to the other side. I mean, I think that I would think, oh good, it's kind of going my way. But then on the other hand, I would think, why is this judge, I would think it was going my way in the sense of, at first, if I found out things were going my way, I would be happy about it. But then if I found out why things were going my way, I would begin to feel very uncomfortable. I mean, if it were me, I would probably be the one who would be going up to the judge saying, or reporting that judge. I would be the one to report the judge.